It might work.
What is up, everyone?
Give him the old Jimmy O. What is up, everyone? I'm Workshop Lewis, and this is my E30 M3 Ute conversion. We're getting really close to getting panels on. If you watched the last episode, I made a bit of a blunder on my hinges, and I think I have to work that out before I can do anything else. But we've got the roof, wheel arches, base, and a rear window panel that we need to get back onto the car, but this time it's personal. We got to get them on there permanently, get the structure of the car like schmick. So then we can get the torsion testing done, get it engineered, and be done with the bodywork on the build so we can start working out the rest of it. Get the fuel tank in, get the car running. I want to drive this by December. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I want to. So let's get straight into the hinges and work out how we're going to fix the problem that I made last episode. Towards the end of the last episode, I done goofed and welded these hinges in when I hadn't finished welding the barrels to each side of the hinge. So this one would be easy enough to weld. We can get to both sides. These two, on the other hand, I can't get underneath. I had thought about making these removable. Very nice subscriber, Glenn, thank you, messaged me and said it would be a really good idea to make them removable. So I'm going to have to cut out, remove the plate attached to the frame, and then work out how to get it so I can bolt this to the frame instead. That's both the hinges cut off. I'm going to replace these two bits of steel just to make them look a little bit nicer. I'll cut them off, cut the replacement, mark out where I want to get the holes. I think it's probably 1, 2 on a diagonal on both sides. I'm then going to cut out a piece of 3mm that's about 90 by 120, and this bit is going to get cut out, that bit right there. I'll weld nuts onto the back of the 3mm and then weld that plate onto the frame. I've got a little bit more strength where it's getting bolted down. I don't want to add too much, just because we want this frame to be able to break if I get hit in the back of the car. Let's cut this off and cut out a piece for that. That was a lot of messing around, but we now have a welded hinge. I do still need to clean up the other welds, but I can do that later, now that it's going to be removable from the chassis. And I've made the plate with the captured nuts on the back. So now we need to slide the slide hinges back into the frame, put the skin on, get that all lined up nice and neatly where it needs to go. And, sorry, before that, remember that, just before that, we need to work out where these nuts are sitting. Cut out a section from the frame so then this can sit flat. Once we've got the frame and the skin on, get this in the right spot, mark around this panel, cut this out, and then this panel mark around the outside of the base panel with the bolts, with the nuts, cut out the frame, and then this panel gets welded to the frame. Let's get the frame and the chassis. No, the frame and the skin. That one. Let's cut out for the nuts. That one. That's the thing that we're going to do next. We do have a cut line, so it's all around about, as long as I make the cut out smaller than the panel. That cut line should be about there. Looks like I didn't cut out enough. So I still need to bring it forward a little bit more. This is going to be interesting. How can I do this? Got an idea. All right, I've got a ratchet strap holding the hinges down. Now I need to get some clamps and clamp the frame to. The panel gap on the back is slightly off, but I kind of already knew about that. I've put the reinforcing plate in. Looks like there's going to be just enough gap, but it is going to be pretty tight. The panel gap down the bottom isn't completely uniform. Either end kind of sweeps up, and I might need to add a little bit of meat just on either end, because I think that's about right. We just want to close this up. Almost in the middle, and the finer adjustments, if it is kind of out a little bit, I should just be able to drill the holes in the hinge plate a little bit more for a little bit more adjustment. So I think that's kind of where it needs to be. I'll mark around each plate, and then I know where I'm cutting out in the frame, and then we can weld these plates to the frame. Both plates are sitting in there quite nicely. I do want to V out both sides just to make sure the weld's getting right down in there. And then I got a little bit of an overhang, but I can clean that up after, cut across, grind it back, and then weld the front across. I'm probably going to need to flatten these welds out as well. So again, it leads into V'ing it out, just so when you weld it, the weld gets right down to the base. Full penetration, baby. Safety shoes on. Let's tack both of them in and double check to make sure it still works. So, we need to have a talk. This issue that I've got going on is an issue, and I don't know how to fix it. If you remember in the last episode, I think it was the last episode? I can't even remember. They're all the same episode to me. I took this bottom panel, we made it up, took it to Southern Classic and Customs, and they rolled it up for me. Looks mint. I went back there, it's Thursday today. I went back there Tuesday and had a chat with Adam, who I think he's the owner there, and said, "Howdy mate, I'm out of my depths. I do not know what the problem is for this rear quarter panel," and gave him a brief explanation, and he said, "I'll come and have a look." Then Wednesday came around. He spent probably 5-10 minutes looking at it, and he said, "Yep, your chassis is like bent up at the rear, and you're pulling your rear quarters up and they're bowing out." So, I somewhat lied a second ago. I didn't know what the issue is, but I do now, and I know how to fix it. So I'm going to take you off the tripod, walk you around, explain what the issue is, and then we can just get into fixing it. Sick. When I cut off the old rear fenders, the frame wasn't in, and there just wasn't enough structure. It was kind of bent. I jacked the rear up, but I jacked it up too high. So this panel, or this whole back section, is up too high. So we've got to remove all of the welds on both rear quarters to about there-ish. I think we're going to need to drill out the welds from the frame to the chassis, and then see if the back drops, because if this panel goes down, these can relax in. Now, he did also say that I should probably start from the front, get my bonnet attached, gap the fenders to the bonnet, gap the doors to the fenders, and then make sure that the rear quarters stay in the same spot, and make sure that the chassis doesn't twist. Now, Let me know in the comments when it all goes wrong, because I'm just going to start removing the welds off the back. Let me know in the comments going, he did tell you so, Workshop Lewis, when something goes wrong. Or, and this is what I'm more hoping for, I undo this back, fix it, and this all stays the same. Well, that's pretty obvious that the back end's up too high. It wants to sit like there. We need to drop this down. There's your problem. I'll just unpick underneath. You can really clearly see the issue that's going on. This back end is just pushed up like way too high. It's probably 15 mil. Now we need to remove the brackets that are holding the frame to the chassis, so then the chassis can drop. This is good. This is so good. When he came around yesterday, I'd already offered to pay him for his time, and he told me the issue, and I was like, yeah, sweet. I know exactly what I've done wrong. I'll put a photo up now, and it's almost a year to date. I'm a week short. It was the 24th of October 2023 that I attached the frame to the chassis, and I did it incorrectly. Well, no, the attaching is correct. The orientation of the chassis is incorrect. Anyway, I offered to pay him. When he left, I was like, what do you drink, mate? And he's like, no, don't worry. But I'm gonna find out what he drinks, and he is taking that alcohol, whether he likes it or not, because this has saved me a huge headache. Thank you very much, Adam. Very much appreciated. I've disconnected the frame from the chassis. All of those welds are unpicked. Try and get an angle of them, yeah, in there. And it didn't really drop. So I'm thinking what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna jack it up from the diff and then put jack stands underneath the rear subframe bolts and see if it relaxes it, or at least pushes this up. Maybe this stays in the same spot. Press record again. It worked. So I put weight on the back of the chassis, and that is opening up the gap between the frame and the chassis. The only issue with that is this was set to this height. So you've got the roll cage, you've got the frame. That is rigid. We're opening up a gap, so we're going to need to probably disconnect the frame from the cage, pivot it down, and then re-weld everything. So there's still a bunch that I need to unpick and backtrack, but like, that's sitting where it wants to sit, and we don't have this giant tapering out at the top. So the fix is going to actually fix it, which is sick. I have tracked down what beer he drinks, and I will be taking that beer to him and just leaving it with him, driving off without it basically, because this has saved me a gigantic headache and saved me from doing something that I thought would fix it, but would have made it way worse. Sick. Yes. I can't completely remember where I left off in the last video, because that was taken probably Thursday or Friday. It's Monday. I've been messing around with this end cap, and we are now plumb, which means I don't need to force any of the rear quarter over, or like, it's just gonna work, which is sick. The only thing that we've got to contend with now is if I put weight on here to pull the chassis down, the frame isn't moving. So we need to go back and basically disconnect the frame from the roll cage, so then it can drop down at the back. Then we can start connecting the brackets to the frame, to the rear quarter, the rear quarters to the chassis, making sure that it's all lined up, all nice and plumb, and then we just re-weld the frame to the chassis and the frame to the roll cage. And then we are good to go. I went and dropped off that carton this morning just to make sure he understands how much I appreciate the help that he gave, because I've been sitting on this problem for like 6 months and he told me what the issue was within 5 minutes. Thank you again, Adam. Huge help. Let's cut the frame away from the cage, and if we do it from the angled support where it meets the frame, it shouldn't pivot too much from back there, so we should just be able to weld it back up again after. Yeah. Oh, that dropped it. I didn't, oh, shit. That dropped. So that means I might only need to do the same to the other side. I've got it connected down here and it's welded from here as well. But if that's all I need to do, that makes it way easier and I need to unpick way less than I thought I needed to. You can push down on the frame now and that pushes down on the chassis. So I think that's all we need to do. I do need to double check to make sure that it's not putting too much pressure on the cage at the B pillar and it's pulling the whole B pillar back. So close. Thick. Look at that. It's not even tacked together, so I can still adjust it a little bit. We're gonna need to close up the gap down the bottom, but easy, easy, easy. Now the next thing that I need to do, now that I know this plate bracket thing is gonna work, I need to make another one for the other side, and then we can start tacking some things together across the rest of it. I can use the Clecos. So I had a subscriber called Glenn, messages me every episode, either says good work or gives me some advice. He said, I've got some spare Clecos and he's gonna send them to me. So perfect timing for them to arrive and for me to be able to use them on the back of the rear quarter. Made the other side. Fits quite nicely. The next issue that, can you see over here? Yeah, you can. Can you? Just. We're not level. This still needs to come down to bring it over, but I think the inner wheel arch that we made in the previous episode is holding it in. So I've got some G-clamps. It might work, but I think I'm gonna put a bit of bar across here so it's spreading the load out a little bit more. We've got the side panels in. I've put the tailgate back on. We now need to work out how much we need to pull down on the chassis for the side, for the quarter panels to sort themselves out. To do that, we're gonna need to make a couple of plates for the ground. We're gonna cut a length of chain off, weld it to a bar, and then bolt the bar to the ground. We can then use these turnbuckles to slowly pull and very, very controlled pull the whole back of the car down into shape. We can then tack the rear quarters to the chassis and see if they want to sit there like nicely. See if they want to play ball. So we're going to have to do a little bit of a side quest, a little bit of a side project, make 2 plates up, bolt them to the ground, and then we can yank on this car a little bit. Concrete screw in that way. Then I've countersunk so I can put the D-shackle through, weld, and then clean that up so it can sit flat on the ground and not have weld on the top. Let's weld them. Plates all made up, clean the back. We're ready to bolt these down. I've tried to line them up just a little bit Hopefully this makes sense. Now we can tighten these and bring it down nice and stable. Let's drill these holes out. We want to try and do this evenly. So we'll just do it little by a little bit. This turnbuckle, this hole isn't drilled straight, so it's not ideal. Check your turnbuckles before you purchase them, apparently. And I also want to loosen them off and take a measurement on each side, just to make sure, or just to see if we're coming down evenly. 5, 1, 2, 5, 2, 4. So there's about 10 mil difference, but I reckon that's in the floor. I think we're ready to weld. So it's pretty much been exactly a year since I made the mistake of welding the frame to the chassis and having it in the wrong position. There's a fair bit of tension on some of these, but not so much that I think it's completely ruining the car, but I have no idea. I am quite nervous. I have built this up to be basically the biggest issue I've had on the car, outside of not being able to get the rear quarter panels, but that was a different kind of issue. I think we just start tacking it together and basically hoping that it's correct. I think when we weld in the capping, that's going to give it a lot of the form, because we need to pull this bit out and that bit up. So twist that up, pull this out. I mean, that's really close. Time to do the other side now. no. Hold it up. Okay. We've got the bottoms welded in. The next step is getting these welded in the top. So as I was saying, that needs to go up and then this needs to come out. So we need to make it so we can put pressure somewhere on here, push it out, and then have a panel that is going to close this gap here. So we've got to work out how we're going to close this gap and this gap. The top one's fairly easy. I've got some material that's folded down, so I can just do a little split and open it up and panel beat it, and then that should just be able to tack to the outside of the top bit. The bottom's probably a little bit more tricky just because it's a little bit bigger than what the fold around is. So we may need to add some material to it, and I think depending on what Workshop Lewis cuts out. Workshop Lewis meant to say, depending on how much stuff Office Lewis cuts out. But besides that, I want to say thank you to Space Jockey. They've let me use their music again, and they are about to release an album, which I am quite excited for in like a couple of weeks. I think it's 18th of November. Check them out, give them a listen. Good music. I've been enjoying it. What was that other thing that I wanted to say? Oh, I don't do this every time, but I'm going to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you're feeling particularly frisky, think about sharing it. Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, whether you're in the UK, US, Europe, Brunei, Trinidad and Tobago. If you've got an E30 country-specific page, can you share it there? Cheers. Also, thanks to the Patreons. I think he's probably going to show me beating this out from the back, which has changed the shape of it, but we can sort that out when it comes to the bodywork. We just need to make sure that we do it before we put the inner wheel arch in. So everyone remind Workshop Lewis to fix that before he closes it up. If not, it's just going to be an absolute pain to do. With all of that, I think we can just lower the tailgate down, cut and then panel beat the tops on both sides, and then it might just be as simple as getting a piece of, say, 0.8, maybe 1 mil, and welding it to the bracket, and then cutting, welding the two together, I think. That actually worked incredibly well. I have a nice line that I can cut straight up, trim a little bit off. There'll be some holes to fill, but that will definitely work. Yeah, spot on. I'll be able to roll that around, and that is sick. Yes, okay, one. That's one. Now we just need to work out what's going on down here. So we've got plenty of meat for the side plate to come up. I'm now going to measure how far it is from here to there, and then just make a little plate, but I am going to come up and go past just to make sure that we're capping off this little bit underneath the indicator. It's about 90 mil long, 10 to 12 mil wide. Cut a couple of strips out, tack it in, we're good. that went really well. So I can clean up the weld, but we can now tack this face straight to here, and this is going to become part of the chassis. Before we do that, we need to work out the latch, because I'm probably going to need to weld on some captive nuts onto the inside, and we need to work out what latch we're using, whether or not Jumbuck, Commodore, D-Max. Sorry, brain's a little slow on that bad boy. So we need to work out where it's going to sit in relationship to the tailgate, drill some holes, weld them on, and then we just have to make it so the latch is in the right spot. We can oval out the catch for small amounts of adjustment, but we want to be pretty spot on with this. But that's looking sick. That's all going to work. It's all going to work, I think, is just all I need to say. I have learnt to check my audio. We're now at the point where I can't do any more to these because I need to attach this latching mechanism, or the striker that I have learnt that it's called. And I've just gone over next to the crash shop, and they've got a Ford Ranger in their shop, and their latching mechanism is way nicer than the one that I've pulled out of the D-Max. I think it's going to be easier to install on the tailgate side and on the striker side, or the chassis side. So I might have found one. I'm going to go check, but this is the next thing that needs to happen. Then we can push it over, weld it all up, and carry on.